There are sounds that trigger a primal, biological fight-or-flight response in the human brain. The dry rattle of a snake in the brush, the distinct clack-clack of a shotgun being pumped. And for me, Jack Miller, a 34-year-old software engineer living in the suburbs of Oak Creek Estates, it was the high-pitched beep-beep-beep of a heavy-duty tow truck reversing into my driveway. I didn't run. I didn't fight. I just stood there on my porch, gripping a mug of lukewarm coffee in one hand and a certified letter in the other, watching a man who looked like he ate gravel for breakfast lower a hydraulic lift toward the bumper of my Honda Civic. "Hey!" I shouted, the word sounding pathetic against the diesel roar of the truck. "Hey, what are you doing?" The driver didn't stop. He just leaned out the window, a lit cigarette dangling precariously from his lip, and pointed a grease-stained finger at the clipboard on his dashboard. "HOA order, buddy. Vehicle is blocking the sidewalk easement by 3 inches. Section 12, paragraph 4. 3 inches? I yelled back, spilling coffee on my socks. "I measured it. It's 6 inches clear of the sidewalk." "Take it up with the board," the driver grunted, shoving the truck into neutral. "I just haul 'em. I don't measure 'em." I looked down at the certified letter in my hand. This wasn't about the car. The car was just a warning shot, a petty jab to let me know they were watching. The real artillery was in the envelope I had just torn open. I unfolded the thick, cream-colored paper. It was heavy stock, the kind used for wedding invitations or declarations of war. At the top, embossed in gold foil that probably cost more than my monthly water bill, was the logo. Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Preserving value. Preserving peace. I read the text again, my eyes burning. Notice of violation level 2. Date, October 14th. Resident, Jack Miller. Address, 404 Maple Drive Violation Code, 44B. External aesthetics and window treatments. Description of infraction. It has come to the attention of the Architectural Review Committee that the window treatments installed in the front-facing living room window are of an unapproved hue. The current treatments appear to be midnight azure. As per the Oak Creek Community Guidelines, page 112, subsection D, all street-facing window treatments must fall within the neutral harmony spectrum, strictly limited to oyster shell white, eggshell cream, or whispering beige. Remediation required. Immediate removal of offending items. Fine assessed. $250 per day until compliance is verified. I looked up from the paper. I looked at my living room window. Hanging there were my curtains. They were blue, just blue, navy blue, if you wanted to be specific. I bought them at Target for $30 because they were blackout curtains, and I liked to code late at night without the streetlights glaring into my eyes. They weren't neon. They weren't tie-dyed. They didn't have offensive slogans printed on them. They were just blue fabric. $250 a day, I whispered to myself. That was more than my car payment. The tow truck driver had hopped out to secure the chains. I ran down the driveway, waving the letter. "Wait, you can't tow it. I'll move it right now." He paused, looking at me with eyes that had seen 1,000 desperate suburbanites. He checked his watch. "Drop fee is $50 if I don't leave the driveway. Full tow is $200 if I hit the asphalt." I fished a $50 bill out of my wallet, my emergency pizza cash, and shoved it into his hand. He unhooked the chains with practiced apathy, climbed back into his cab, and rumbled away, leaving a cloud of exhaust that smelled like burning money. I moved the car up 4 inches. Then I went inside, grabbed a tape measure, and verified it. 7 inches from the sidewalk. I took a photo with a timestamp. Then I looked at the curtains again. Midnight azure? Who even talks like that? I knew who talked like that. Brenda St. James, the president of the Oak Creek Estates HOA, the self-appointed guardian of property values and the destroyer of joy. She was a woman who didn't just follow the rules. She inhaled them, metabolized them, and excreted them as fines. I couldn't afford $250 a day. I barely wanted to afford the mortgage on this place. I had moved here 6 months ago, thinking it would be a quiet place to work remotely. I wanted a yard for a dog I didn't have yet. I wanted a garage for projects I hadn't started. What I got was a regime that made North Korea look like a casual beach club. I grabbed my keys, the letter, and my phone. I was going to the source. Brenda lived 3 streets over, on Majestic Oak Boulevard, which, ironically, had no oaks because the HOA had cut them all down 5 years ago for excessive leaf litter. Her house was the model home of the neighborhood. The lawn was cut to a laser-precise 2.5 inches. The flower beds were arranged in a Fibonacci sequence of marigolds and petunias. Her front door was painted a color that I'm sure was called welcoming beige, but it felt more like abandon hope all ye who enter here tan. I walked up the driveway, rehearsing my speech. Hi, Brenda. Look, I think there's been a mistake. They're just curtains. I can pull the blinds down so you don't see them. Can we be reasonable adults? I rang the doorbell. It played the first 4 bars of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. The door opened. Brenda stood there. She was a small woman, maybe in her late 50s, with hair that was sprayed into a helmet of blonde defiance. She was wearing a polo shirt with the HOA crest embroidered on the pocket and khakis that were pressed so sharply you could slice cheese with the pleats. "Mr. Miller," she said before I could even open my mouth. She didn't smile. Her lips just thinned horizontally. "I assume you received the correspondence?" "Correspondence?" I held up the letter. "Brenda, you're fining me $250 a day for curtains. Blue curtains." She sighed. A long, weary sound, as if my stupidity was a physical weight she had to carry. "Not blue, Jack. Midnight azure. And it's not about the color itself, it's about cohesion." She stepped out onto her porch, closing the door behind her to prevent me from glimpsing the sanctum. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a fan deck of paint swatches. She literally carried a color wheel with her. "Look at this," she said, fanning out a section of whites and creams. She held it up against the horizon, as if comparing the sky to her standards. "Oak Creek Estates is a brand, Jack. When a prospective buyer drives through, they need to feel a sense of uniformity, calm, order. When they see your textiles screaming out from the window, it disrupts the visual flow of the streetscape. It suggests anarchy." "Anarchy?" I laughed, a dry, hysterical sound. "Brenda, they're curtains. They block light. That's their only function. They don't advocate for the overthrow of the government." "Perception is reality," she clipped. "Violation 44B is clear. Street-facing windows must present a neutral backing. You signed the CC&Rs when you bought the house. Did you read them?" "I skimmed them. It was 400 pages. "Ignorance of the law is no excuse," she said, reciting the mantra of bureaucrats everywhere. "You have 24 hours to remediate the issue, or the fines will be retroactive to the date of the first observation, which was Tuesday." "Tuesday? You've been watching my windows since Tuesday?" "We have volunteers," she said vaguely. "Neighborhood watch implies watching, Jack." I took a deep breath. I needed to de-escalate. I needed to be the bigger person. I was a professional. I solved logic problems for a living. This was just a logic problem with bad hair. "Okay," I said, lowering my voice. "Okay, Brenda, I get it. Cohesion. Look, I can't replace them immediately. They were expensive. But what if I just keep the blinds closed? The blinds are white. They came with the house." Brenda shook her head slowly. "Blinds are distinct from drapery. At night, with your interior lights on, the blue cast is visible through the slats. It creates a cool-toned aura that clashes with the warm amber streetlights. It's visually jarring." Visually jarring. "So, what do you want me to do?" I asked, feeling my grip on reality slipping. "Replace them," she said simply. "Or, if you must be difficult, purchase a compliant liner. White, heavyweight. Ensure it completely masks the azure." She turned to go back inside. "Oh, and Jack, move your car. The tire is touching the expansion joint of the driveway. That's technically structural damage risk. We'll let it slide with a warning this time." The door clicked shut. The Ode to Joy doorbell seemed to mock me in the silence. I walked back home, rage simmering in my gut like a bad curry. I didn't want to fight. I really didn't. I just wanted to write code, play video games, and occasionally eat a sandwich in peace. But $250 a day was ruinous. Vorhin, I went to Bed Bath & Beyond. I entered the window treatment aisle, a place where hopes and dreams go to die amidst polyester blends. I found universal curtain liners. They were white. They were $15 a panel. I bought 4. I spent the rest of the Saturday afternoon wrestling with the curtains. I had to take them down, hook the liners into the grommets, and rehang them. It was tedious work. I pricked my finger on a drapery hook and bled on the oyster shell fabric, forcing me to scrub it out with bleach pen frantically so I wouldn't get fined for unapproved red spots. By 6 p.m. it was done. From the street, the window looked like a wall of white. Bland, boring, perfect. I took a picture. I emailed it to the HOA board address. Subject, remediation of violation 44B. Tan Chuipan. Message. Curtains are now lined with white fabric. Number. Please confirm compliance and rescind fines. I poured myself a drink and sat on my couch. I felt defeated, but at least I was safe. I had bent the knee. I had kissed the ring. I was one with the beige. Sunday morning arrived. I was feeling better. I made pancakes. I was drinking coffee, actually enjoying the sunlight filtering through the now compliant white liners. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. It wasn't the pizza delivery. It wasn't Amazon. It was the sharp, authoritative ding-dong of doom. I opened the door. It was Brenda, and this time she had a clipboard and a man named Steve. Steve was the HOA vice president. He was a guy who always wore a Bluetooth earpiece, even when talking to you face-to-face, blinking like a cyborg. "Good morning, Jack," Brenda said. Her voice was too bright. It was the voice of a predator who had cornered a wounded gazelle. "Morning, Brenda. Steve?" I nodded. "Did you get my email? I fixed the curtains." "We saw the email," Steve said, looking at his clipboard. "And we performed a site inspection at 0800 hours. "And?" I asked. "It's a no-go, buddy," Steve said. "Excuse me?" I stepped out onto the porch. "Look at them. They're white. They're literally the whitest thing in this neighborhood other than you two." Brenda bristled. "There is no need for personal attacks. We are discussing the texture." "Texture?" I felt my left eye twitch. Brenda pointed to the window. "You purchased the standard liners. They are a cotton poly blend with a crosshatch weave." "So?" The guideline, subsection D, paragraph 4, clearly states that street-facing backings must be smooth satin or velvet matte. The crosshatch weave catches the sunlight and creates a mottled appearance. "It looks cheap, Jack. It looks industrial." "You have got to be kidding me," I said. "You're looking at the weave. From the sidewalk? You'd need binoculars." Steve tapped his nose. "Standard issue for the ARC, 10x magnification." I stared at them. They were serious. They were actually legitimately serious. They had stood on the sidewalk with binoculars, inspecting the thread count of my curtain liners. "So what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I have to buy new ones?" "Yes," Brenda said. "And unfortunately, because the remediation was attempted but failed to meet standards, the initial violation stands. You are still currently in non-compliance. That's 2 days of fines. $500. Plus," Steve added, making a check mark on his paper, "we're adding an insubordination surcharge because of your tone yesterday, and the refusal to accept the initial guidance gracefully." "Insubordination?" I stepped closer. "I don't work for you. I pay you dues. You work for me." Brenda smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a bureaucrat who knew she had the weight of a legally binding contract signed in blood and ink behind her. "Read the bylaws, Jack. Article 5. Conduct toward board members. Disrespectful behavior that hinders the board's ability to govern is finable up to $100 per incident." "So that's $600, Steve calculated. "Due by Friday, or we place a lien on the property." A lien. The word hung in the air. They were threatening my house. Over curtain texture. "We want you to succeed here, Jack," Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We really do, but you have to want it too. You have to want to be part of the Oak Creek vision." They turned and walked down the driveway. Brenda stopped to pull a single weed from a crack in my sidewalk, dropping it dramatically on the concrete as a final insult. I stood there for a long time. I watched them walk to the next house, where Steve pulled out a ruler to measure the grass height. Something broke inside me. It wasn't a loud snap. It was a quiet, cold realization. I had tried to play by their rules. I had tried to be reasonable. I had spent money I didn't want to spend to fix a problem that didn't exist. And they had laughed in my face. They didn't want compliance. They wanted submission. They wanted to crush me into a beige cube that fit perfectly into their little beige world. But they had made a mistake. A critical, tactical error. They assumed I was just a regular guy. They didn't know that I was a systems architect. My entire career was built on finding bugs in code, finding loopholes, finding the weak points in a system, and exploiting them until the system crashed or did exactly what I told it to do. I went inside and locked the door. I pulled the curtains shut, the cross-hatched, offending $600 curtains. I walked to my office and sat down at my computer. I cracked my knuckles. "Okay, Brenda," I said to the empty room. "You want to quote the book? Let's read the book." I logged into the HOA resident portal. It was a terrible website, probably built in 2005, protected by a password that was undoubtedly password 123. I tried it. It wasn't. It was Oak Creek 1. Close enough. I downloaded the CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the Bible of Oak Creek, 412 pages of legal jargon, formatting errors, and pretension. I opened a fresh can of energy drink. I opened a spreadsheet. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I was going to read every single word. I was going to find out exactly what constituted a window treatment. I was going to find out what the definition of light was. I was going to find the invisible lines they had drawn, and I was going to dance on them. I read for 6 hours straight. My eyes blurred. My brain felt like it was leaking out of my ears. It was mostly standard stuff. Grass height, trash can placement. No commercial vehicles, no livestock. There goes my dream of an alpaca farm. And then, at 3 a.m., I found it. Page 114. Section 12, Illumination and Holiday Displays. Subsection A, Exterior Lighting. All exterior fixtures must be brass or brushed nickel. Bulbs must be soft white, 2700 K. No colored bulbs permitted except during approved holiday windows, December 1st, January 5th. Subsection B, Interior Lighting, visible from street. Interior lamps should not excessively glare onto the street. Subsection C, Signage. No political signs, for sale signs, or contractor signs may be displayed on the lawn for more than 48 hours. I stopped. I read it again. It talked about exterior lighting. It talked about lawn signs. It talked about window treatments, fabric, blinds, shutters. But nowhere, absolutely nowhere, did it say anything about digital displays inside the home. The bylaws were written in 1998. They were worried about people putting up neon beer signs or tinfoil. They hadn't anticipated high-definition, commercial-grade LED matrix panels. They hadn't anticipated technology that could turn a window into a billboard. I leaned back in my chair. A slow grin spread across my face. If I put a sign inside my window, it wasn't an exterior fixture. It wasn't a window treatment because it wasn't fabric or wood. It was furniture. It was a lamp. A very, very complicated lamp. But I needed more than just a loophole. I needed ammunition. I clicked on the Financials tab of the HOA portal. Usually these things are boring. Landscaping costs, pool chemicals, insurance. I opened the budget for the current fiscal year. Income, $450,000. We had 400 homes paying hefty dues. Expenses? I scrolled down. Landscaping, $120,000. Pool, $40,000. Legal fees, $60,000. Yikes. And then I saw it, buried under Administrative and Consulting. Line item 704, President's Operational Stipend, Consultant Fee, Payee, BSJ Management, LLC. Amount, $4,500. Month. I froze. HOA board positions are volunteer. That's the law in our state, unless explicitly voted on by the homeowners. I had never voted on paying Brenda a salary. Nobody I knew had. I quickly Googled BSJ Management, LLC. The registered agent was Brenda St. James. The registered address was 12 Majestic Oak Boulevard, Brenda's house. She was paying herself $54,000 a year to walk around with a color wheel and measure my curtains. She was stealing our money to fine us for things she made up. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just petty revenge anymore. This was a crusade. I looked at the window. The midnight azure problem. Brenda wanted neutral? Brenda wanted informative? I picked up my phone. I didn't need a curtain guy. I needed an electrician. I needed a guy who didn't ask questions. I texted my buddy Mike, who owned a bar downtown. Me. Hey man, who did the giant LED scoreboard in your bar? The one that blinds people? Mike. That's high voltage Hank. Why? You opening a club? Me. No, I'm opening a museum of truth. I looked at the clock. 4:15 a.m. I wasn't going to pay the fine. I wasn't going to change the texture of my liners. I was going to light up the neighborhood. Hank arrived at 8 a.m. on Monday, and his entrance was less of an arrival and more of a declaration of war against suburban aesthetics. He drove a Ford Econoline van that was white in theory, but in practice was a rusted canvas of gray primer, scratches, and a bumper sticker that read, "I don't brake for idiots." It sounded like a tractor choking on a bag of bolts. As he rumbled down Maple Drive, I watched neighbors peek out from behind their plantation shutters, their eyes widening in horror. In Oak Creek Estates, the service vehicles were usually pristine Sprinter vans with tasteful logos like Elite Plumbing or Verdant Lawns. Hank's van just said, Hank's Electric, in peeling black vinyl letters that were slightly crooked. He pulled into my driveway, hopping the curb slightly with a suspension groaning crunch. Oil immediately began to drip onto my pristine concrete. I opened the front door. "You must be Hank." Hank climbed out. He was a mountain of a man, easily 6'4", wearing a stained Carhartt vest over a t-shirt that had seen better decades. He had a lit cigarette in his mouth, which he immediately flicked onto my driveway, crushed with a heavy boot, and pocketed the butt. A professional. "Mike said you got a problem with the neighbors," Hank rumbled. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "Said you wanted the Surface of the Sun package." "Come inside," I said, glancing nervously at Mrs. Gable's house across the street. She was already on her phone, likely speed-dialing Brenda. "We don't have much time before the vultures circle." Hank followed me inside, his boots leaving faint dust prints on the hardwood. I led him to the living room and pointed at the window currently covered by the hated, cross-hatched, non-compliant white liners. "I need a display," I said. "I need to cover that entire window frame, top to bottom, side to side. And I need it to be bright, not TV bright. Scoreboard bright." Hank whistled low. He walked over to the window, tapped the glass, and measured the frame with his eyes. "That's what, 8 by 6? That's 48 square feet of diodes, kid. You trying to signal aliens?" "I'm trying to signal a thief," I said. "Can you do it?" Hank scratched his chin, the stubble rasping audibly. "I can do anything if the check clears. I did the strip club out on Route 9. I did the flashing skull for that heavy metal bar downtown. But this is residential. You got a standard 200 amp panel?" "I think so." "We're gonna need to look at that. These panels, the ones I use, they eat juice. You turn this on while running the dryer and the AC, you're gonna trip the main breaker and possibly melt your wiring insulation." We went to the garage. Hank tore the cover off my breaker panel like he was peeling an orange. He poked around with a voltmeter, humming a tune that sounded vaguely like AC/DC. "All right," he said, stepping back. "Here's the play. I can't wire this into your living room circuit. I gotta run a dedicated sub-panel. We'll punch a hole through the firewall, run conduit along the baseboard so you don't have to rip up drywall, and hook it straight to the main feed. It'll look ugly as sin, but it'll hold the load." "I don't care about ugly. I said. I care about reliability. This thing needs to run 24/7. 24/7? Hank grinned, revealing a gold tooth. You really hate these people, don't you? Hank, I said, you have no idea. Good. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. I hate HOAs. They fined me $500 once because my mailbox was leaning 3 degrees to the left. 3 degrees. I measured it with a laser level just to prove them wrong, but they said my level was uncalibrated. Let's cook these bastards. By 10 a.m., the trouble started. Hank was in the van bringing in boxes of what looked like heavy industrial equipment. I was in the garage helping him carry in the LED modules. These weren't flimsy consumer strips. These were P3.91 outdoor-rated LED cabinet panels. They were heavy, black, and smelled of ozone and expensive electronics. I heard the clack, clack, clacks of heels on the driveway. Excuse me! Excuse me! I froze. I knew that voice. It was the siren song of the suburbs. I stepped out of the garage. Brenda was standing there, her face contorted into a mask of righteous indignation. She was pointing a manicured finger at Hank's van. Jack, she barked. What is that? That's a van, Brenda, I said, wiping grease off my hands. It has wheels, an engine, it transports things. It is a commercial vehicle, she snapped. Article 9, Section C. No commercial vehicles with visible signage or equipment racks may be parked in driveways for longer than 60 minutes for active loading or unloading. He's working, I said. Active loading. He's bringing in supplies. Brenda narrowed her eyes. She looked at Hank, who was currently hauling a massive metal flight case up the driveway. He stopped, looked at her, winked, and kept walking. What kind of supplies? Brenda demanded. You didn't file an architectural change request for any renovations. Any internal structural changes that affect the electrical load or plumbing require board approval. She was fishing. She didn't know what we were doing, but she smelled blood. It's not structural, I lied smoothly. It's furniture. I'm getting a custom entertainment center installed. Very heavy, very expensive. Does it require a permit? No. Well, she huffed, checking her watch. He has been here since 8 a.m. That is 2 hours. That is a violation. I am logging it. $25 fine for the first hour over the limit, $50 for the second. Put it on my tab, I said coldly. Add it to the pile. She bristled. She wasn't used to people not cowering. You're digging a deep hole, Jack. We're discussing your case at the monthly meeting on Thursday. The board is considering a total compliance order. If you don't pay your fines and fix the curtains, we have the right to revoke your access to the community pool and gym. Oh no, I deadpanned. Not the gym with the broken treadmill. Whatever will I do? She glared at me, then turned her gaze to Hank's van again. She pulled out her phone and snapped a picture of the license plate. I'm calling the towing company. If this vehicle isn't gone in 30 minutes, it will be removed. She spun on her heel and marched away. I walked back into the garage. Hank was laughing. She's a pistol, that one, he said. She threatens to tow me? She will, I said. They're vicious. Hank reached into the van and pulled out a magnetic sheet. He slapped it over the Hank's Electric logo on the side of his door. The magnet was plain white. There, he said. Now it's just a private vehicle. Loophole. I like the way you think, Hank. The installation was a nightmare of physics and dust. To make this work, we couldn't just hang the panels. We had to build a false wall. The LED cabinets locked together to form a seamless screen, but they needed a rigid frame. Hank constructed a skeleton out of aluminum extrusion right inside my bay window. It was loud. The sound of the chop saw cutting aluminum echoed through the house. I turned up my stereo to drown it out, playing heavy metal, naturally, just to annoy Brenda further. While Hank built the skeleton, I went back to my computer. The hardware was being handled. I needed to refine the software. I needed to weaponize the data I had found the night before. I dug back into the BSJ Management LLC rabbit hole. I paid $50 to a background check website. I pulled property records. I found out that BSJ Management wasn't just receiving a stipend. I found an invoice in the HOA Miscellaneous folder, which I had downloaded before they could change the password, for Community Beautification Consulting. Amount, $12,000. Date, last June. Description, assessment of floral arrangements for entryway. 12 grand to look at flowers? I cross-referenced the date. That same week, Brenda's personal Facebook page, which was public because boomers don't understand privacy settings, showed photos of her on a cruise to the Mediterranean. Caption, loving the flowers in Tuscany, #blessed, hard work pays off. My blood boiled. She used our money to pay for her vacation. She fined me for blue curtains to subsidize her trip to Italy. I started a text file. Of fact #1, Brenda St. James pays herself $4, $500 month from your dues. Fact #2, BSJ Management charged $12,000 for flower consulting while Brenda was in Tuscany. Fact #3, the HOA board treasurer is Brenda's brother-in-law. I had just verified that on LinkedIn. This was dynamite. But I needed a delivery system. I opened the control software for the LED panels. It was professional broadcasting software. I could set scroll speed, brightness, color, and font. I chose a font, Impact, bold, all caps, readable from a moving car at 40 miles per hour. I set the background color to pure, unadulterated black, 000. I set the text color to a piercing neon green, 02550. Then, I looked at the brightness slider. It went from 0% to 100%. "Hey, Hank!" I yelled into the living room. "Yo! What's the nit rating on these panels?" Hank walked in, wiping sweat from his forehead. "These are outdoor panels, kid. They're rated for direct sunlight visibility, about 6,000 nits." For context, a standard iPhone screen is about 800 nits. A high-end HDR TV is maybe 1,000. 6,000 nits, I whispered. "That's not a lamp, that's a lighthouse." "If you run it at 100% at night," Hank warned, "you're gonna get cops. Not HOA cops, real cops. You'll blind drivers." "We'll start at 20%, I said. "We can ramp it up if they don't listen." By 4 p.m., the frame was up. The window was completely blocked from the inside. From the street, it just looked like I had hung a heavy black sheet behind the glass. We had to be careful. If Brenda saw the electronics before they were live, she'd get an injunction. She'd find a judge to sign a temporary restraining order halting unpermitted construction. So, we initiated Operation Decoy. I went out to the front porch with a roll of heavy black plastic sheeting and duct tape. I taped the plastic over the outside of the window glass. As expected, within 8 minutes, a golf cart rolled up. It was Steve, the cyborg vice president. "Jack," Steve said, stopping the cart. "What is this? Trash bags on the window? Violation 14A, unsightly debris." "It's emergency waterproofing," I lied, looking frantic. "I found a leak in the seal, moisture intrusion, mold risk. I have to keep it dry until the glazier comes next week." "Mold?" Steve took a step back. "The suburbs fear mold more than nuclear war. It destroys property values." "Yeah, black mold," I said. "Spreading fast. You don't want to get too close, Steve. Spores." Steve covered his mouth and nose with his hand. "Right, well, get it fixed. You have 3 days before we fine you for the plastic." "Thanks, Steve. You're a peach." He sped off. I went back inside. "Bought us 3 days, I told Hank. "We only need 3 hours, Hank said. He was connecting the final data cables. The back of the wall looked like the inside of a server room, a mess of Cat6 cables and power bricks. "Power check," Hank said. He walked over to the new sub-panel he had installed in the hallway. He flipped the breaker. Thunk. A low hum filled the room. The cooling fans on the LED cabinets whirred to life. It sounded like a drone taking off. "Signal check," Hank said. I sat at my laptop. I connected to the display controller. "All right," I said. "Testing dead pixels. Full white field, 10% brightness." I hit enter, flash. Even at 10% brightness, and even facing away from us toward the street, the light leaking around the edges of the frame lit up the living room like a flashbang had gone off. The black plastic taped outside the window glowed like a radioactive containment field. "Holy mother," Hank laughed. "That is bright." It's beautiful, I said. I quickly turned it off. We couldn't let them see it yet. Not until it was perfect. Not until prime time. So, Hank said, packing up his tools. When's the grand opening? Friday night, I said. Brenda hosts her weekly wine and wine mixer on her porch on Fridays. Everyone walks by my house to get there. Hank handed me an invoice. It was for $8,000. It was a lot of money. It was my savings for a new car. Worth every penny, I said, writing the check. You let me know if you need the strobe mode unlocked. Hank grinned. It causes seizures, but it definitely gets attention. I'll keep that in reserve. Hank left around 6 p.m., his van rattling off into the sunset, leaving another oil stain on my driveway. I was alone with the weapon. The next 2 days were a blur of anxiety and preparation. I didn't leave the house, I ordered groceries delivered, and watched the delivery driver recoil in confusion at the blacked-out window. I worked on the sequence. I didn't just want a scrolling text, I wanted a presentation. I created graphics. I made a bar graph showing the rise in HOA dues correlated with Brenda's consulting fees. I made a pie chart titled, Where Your Money Goes. One sliver was maintenance, the rest was Brenda's ego. I also bought a police scanner, just in case. On Thursday, the total compliance order arrived in the mail. They were escalating. They were threatening to sue me for specific performance, which essentially meant asking a court to force me to obey the bylaws. They wanted to garnish my wages to pay the $1,500 in fines I had accrued. I taped the letter to the back of the LED wall. Fuel for the fire. Friday arrived. The sun began to set. The sky turned a beautiful shade of twilight purple. Ironically, almost the same color as my midnight Absor curtains. I sat in my living room, the lights off. My laptop was open. The screen glowed with the control interface. System status, online. Temperature, nominal. Brightness, set to 85%. I decided 100% might actually cause a plane crash. I checked the time, 7:45 p.m. The neighbors would be walking to Brenda's soon. I stood up and walked to the window. I unlocked the front door. I went outside. The air was cool. Crickets were chirping. It was a perfect, peaceful suburban evening. I walked to the window and peeled off the black plastic and duct tape. The glass was dark. Behind it, the LED panels were black, invisible in the gloom. It just looked like a dark window. I saw Mrs. Higgins walking her poodle. I saw Mr. Henderson walking with a bottle of wine in a gift bag. They were heading toward majestic Oak Boulevard. I went back inside. I sat at the laptop. My finger hovered over the play button. This was it, the nuclear option. Once I did this, there was no going back. I would be the pariah of Oak Creek. I would be the guy who broke the unspoken social contract of suburbia. But then I thought about the $4,500 a month. I thought about the flower consulting. I thought about the 2.5-inch grass rule. I hit the space bar. The effect was instantaneous. It wasn't like turning on a light. It was like an explosion of photons. A beam of pure, coherent green light blasted out of my living room window. It cut through the darkness, illuminating the street, the sidewalk, the trees, and the house across the street with a ghostly, cyberpunk glow. The text began to scroll. It was 3 feet tall. Attention. Oak Creek residents. The letters were so crisp, so sharp, they looked like they were hovering in the air. Did you know? Your HOA dues are being stolen. I ran to the peephole in my front door to watch. Mrs. Higgins had stopped. Her poodle was barking at the window. She was shielding her eyes with her hand, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. Mr. Henderson dropped his wine bottle. It shattered on the sidewalk, but he didn't notice. He was staring, mouth agape, as the next message scrolled by. HOA President Brenda St. James pays herself $4,500 a month. She calls it a consulting fee, total stolen from community funds, $54,000 per year. Ask her about the flower consulting trip to Italy. I could see the reflection of the green light on the siding of the house across the street. It was pulsing rhythmically as the words moved. Then the graphics started. The pie chart appeared. It was massive. The Brenda's pocket slice was bright red. More people were stopping. Cars were slowing down. A minivan hit its brakes so hard the tires squealed. The driver leaned out, phone in hand, recording. I opened the window slightly to hear the reaction. "Is that true?" I heard someone ask. 54,000? "I thought they were volunteers," someone shouted. "Honey, look at this. Look at the graph!" It was working. It was actually working. But I knew the clock was ticking. Brenda wasn't far away. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, I heard the shrieking. Turn it off right now!" I looked out. Brenda was running down the street. She wasn't walking with her usual dignified trot. She was sprinting, her wine glass still in hand, splashing Chardonnay onto the asphalt. Steve was right behind her, looking like a panicked sidekick. She stopped in front of my driveway, bathed in the harsh green light of her own financial records. She looked demonic. The light emphasized every wrinkle of fury on her face. "Jack Miller!" she screamed at the house. "I know you're in there! This is illegal! This is slander! This is vandalism of the eyes!" I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. I put on a pair of sunglasses. It felt cool. "Evening, Brenda," I shouted over the hum of the cooling fans. "Like the new window treatment. It's not blue, it's light. Pure energy, no texture to critique." "You take that down!" she shrieked, pointing at the scrolling salary figure. "That is confidential board information." "It's not confidential if you stole it," I yelled back. "It's evidence." A crowd was gathering now. The neighbors who were supposed to be at her party were now standing in a semicircle on my lawn. They weren't looking at me with anger. They were looking at Brenda. "Brenda," Mr. Henderson asked, stepping forward. "Is that true? Are you taking a salary?" "It is a standard stipend for administrative burden," Brenda stammered, turning to face them. The green light washed over her, making her look like a villain from a cheap sci-fi movie. "I work 40 hours a week, keeping this neighborhood pure. I deserve compensation." "You told us the budget shortfall was because of water prices," Mrs. Higgins yelled. "You raised our dues 10%. That was necessary," Brenda cried. The sign changed. I had queued up the next slide. "Brenda's landscaping company is owned by her son. They charge 200% market rate." The crowd gasped. It was audible, a collective intake of breath. "Lies!" Brenda screamed. "This is libel! I'm calling the police! Steve, call the police!" Steve fumbled for his phone. "I'm on it, Brenda, 911! "Go ahead," I shouted. "Call them. I'd love to show them the invoices." We stood there in a standoff for 15 minutes. The sign cycled through the greatest hits of Brenda's corruption. The crowd grew. People were live streaming. I saw flashes of cameras. Then, the flashing red and blue lights arrived. 2 cruisers, 4 officers. Officer Miller, no relation, stepped out. He was a big guy, tired-looking. He walked up the driveway, squinting against the glare of the LED wall. All right, he boomed. "Who's responsible for the tanning bed?" "I am, officer," I said, stepping down. Brenda rushed the cop. Arrest him immediately! He's disturbing the peace, he's harassing me, he's projecting lies onto the street." Officer Miller looked at the sign. He read the scrolling text. Brenda St. James used HOA funds for a strategic planning retreat in Cabo. He blinked. He looked at Brenda. "Ma'am, is this your salary?" "That is private corporation data," Brenda spat. "It's an HOA, ma'am." "Isn't that public record for the residents?" "He has no right to display it at this decibel of brightness." She pivoted. "It's a traffic hazard." Officer Miller looked at me. "Sir, it is pretty bright. We got calls from the highway. People think a UFO landed." "I can dim it, officer," I said reasonably. "I can drop it to 50%. "Do that," Miller said. I pulled out my phone. I had set up remote access. I slid the brightness down. The glare softened, but the text remained perfectly legible. "Better?" I asked. "Much," Miller said. "Officer!" Brenda shrieked. "You have to make him take it down. It violates the CC&Rs, Section 44B. Miller sighed. He hooked his thumbs in his belt. "Ma'am, I enforce the penal code, not the CC&Rs. Is the sign shouting profanity?" "No," Brenda admitted. Is it showing nudity? No. Is it threatening physical violence? It's threatening my reputation. That's a civil matter, Miller said. Take him to court. As far as I can tell, this man is on his own property, exercising his First Amendment right to complain about his HOA dues, which, frankly, I sympathize with. My HOA made me take down my basketball hoop. He looked at me and winked. But seriously, keep the brightness down. If you cause an accident, that's on you. Understood, officer. Miller got back in his car. Brenda stood there, vibrating with rage. The police had left. The neighbors were still there, staring at her. The sign was still scrolling. Brenda, resign. This isn't over, Jack, she hissed. I will bankrupt you. I will put a lien on this house so deep you'll never see daylight again. Good thing I have my own light, I said, pointing to the window. She turned to storm off, but found her path blocked by Mr. Henderson and a dozen other neighbors. We need to talk, Brenda, Henderson said, his voice low and dangerous, about the flower consulting. I watched as the mob surrounded her. They weren't violent, but they were demanding answers. They were awake. I went back inside, grabbed a beer, and sat on the couch. The back of the LED panels hummed reassuringly. I had won the battle, but the war was just starting. Brenda wouldn't go down without a fight. She had lawyers. She had the HOA treasury, or what was left of it. But I had 48 square feet of truth. And I was just getting started. The hum of the cooling fans had become a kind of white noise lullaby, a constant industrial drone that vibrated through the floorboards of the second story. I woke up on Saturday morning not to the sound of birds, but to the sound of a shutter clicking. I dragged myself out of bed, grabbed a mug of coffee, and peeked through the blinds of my bedroom window, which were compliant, thank you very much. The street looked like a tailgate party for a football game where the teams were common sense and bureaucracy. There were at least 30 people standing on the sidewalk and the street. Some were neighbors I recognized. Others were strangers. Teenagers on electric scooters, a guy walking a parrot, and a family eating donuts out of a box. They were all staring at my living room window. I went downstairs. Then, the living room was bathed in the artificial glow of the back of the LED cabinets. My laptop, still connected to the controller, showed the uptime. 14 hours, 22 minutes. I checked the sequence. It was currently displaying slide 4. Brenda's office supply budget, $8,000. Did you know she bought a massage chair? I unlocked the front door and stepped out. A cheer went up. Actual applause. It's him, someone shouted. The Lightbringer. Morning, everyone, I said, raising my mug. How's the show? Better than Netflix, yelled Mrs. Gable from across the street. She was sitting in a lawn chair in her own driveway, drinking a mimosa. This was the same woman who once reported me for leaving my trash bin out for an extra hour. Hey, Jack, put up the graph about the pool chemicals again. My husband didn't believe me. Coming right up, Mrs. Gee, I said. I went back inside and tweaked the playlist. This was power. This was influence. But the Empire strikes back. I knew that. And the Empire arrived at 10 a.m. in a black BMW. A man in a suit that cost more than my car stepped out. He carried a briefcase. He didn't look at the sign. He looked at the ground, walked up my driveway, and handed me a thick envelope. Mr. Miller? That's me. You are served, he said. Emergency injunction and complaint for damages. Have a nice day. He turned and walked away before I could even offer a quip. I opened the envelope on the porch. It was thick. Oak Creek Estates HOA versus Jack Miller. They were suing me for defamation, tortious interference with business contracts. And, my personal favorite, light trespass. They were seeking $100,000 in damages and an immediate court order to dismantle the electronic nuisance. My stomach did a little flip. Lawsuits are scary. Even when you're right, they're expensive. But then I saw the news van. It pulled up right behind the process server's BMW. It was a white van with a satellite dish on top and the logo of Channel 8 Action News. A reporter hopped out. I recognized her. It was heavy-hitter investigative journalist Diane Cruz. She was known for chasing down corrupt mayors and slumlords. "Mr. Miller," she called out, a cameraman jogging behind her. "Diane Cruz, Channel 8. Can we get a comment on the display?" I looked at the lawsuit in my hand. I looked at the reporter. I looked at the sign scrolling Brenda St. James. "Where is the money?" "Diane," I said, putting on my best concerned citizen face. "I'd love to talk. Come on in, mind the cables." The interview was a masterclass in passive-aggressive victimhood. I sat on my couch, framed perfectly so the humming wall of electronics was visible behind me. "I just wanted to hang my curtains," I told Diane, looking sad. "I work hard. I just wanted some privacy. But when they threatened to take my home over a shade of blue, I felt I had no choice but to shed some light on the situation. Literally." Diane leaned in. "And these financial figures? Where did you get them?" "Public records," I said, holding up a stack of printouts. "It's all here. The consulting fees, the travel expenses, the nepotism. I'm not making this up, Diane. I'm just a guy with a soldering iron and a dream of transparency." "The HOA president claims this is harassment," Diane said, playing devil's advocate. "Harassment?" I laughed gently. "Is transparency harassment? If the truth hurts Brenda's feelings, maybe she shouldn't have spent $12,000 of our money on floral consulting in Tuscany." The segment aired at noon. By 1 p.m., a clip of it was trending on Twitter. The hashtag #HoLightShow was born. People were replying from all over the country. At Suburban Dad 44. "Not all heroes wear capes. Some install commercial LED walls." At Karen Hunter. "I want to buy this man a beer and a generator." At Legal Eagle. "Actually, if those are valid financial disclosures, he has a strong First Amendment defense. Malice is hard to prove if the statements are true." Brenda, however, was not on Twitter. She was on the warpath. At 2 p.m., the power went out. The hum of the fans died. The room went pitch black. The scrolling text vanished. "Oh, you dirty," I muttered. I looked out the window. An electrical utility truck was parked at the transformer box down the street. Steve, the cyborg vice president, was standing next to the utility worker pointing at my house. They had cut my service. Probably claimed it was a safety hazard due to unpermitted load. I stormed out the front door. The crowd groaned. "Boo!" yelled a teenager. "Turn it back on!" "They cut the line!" I shouted. "Brenda pulled the plug!" I ran down the street to the utility truck. Steve saw me coming and crossed his arms, a smug smile plastered on his face. "Safety first, Jack," Steve called out. "We had reports of a grid instability. I had to disconnect you until a certified inspector can come out. Earliest appointment is, let's see, 3 weeks from now." "You can't do that," I yelled. "This is a residential service. I pay my bill." "It's out of my hands," Steve shrugged. "Grid stability is paramount." I stood there, impotent rage vibrating through me. They had won. They had silenced the wall. Without power, I was just a guy with a dark window and a lawsuit. I walked back to my house, head down. The crowd was dispersing. The show was over. I went inside and sat in the silent, dark living room. I looked at the black panels. "Well, Hank," I whispered, "it was fun while it lasted." Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Hank. "Hank, saw the news. Hilarious. Also saw the power co-outage map. They cut you?" Me. "Yeah." Steve claimed safety hazard. "I'm dead in the water." Hank. "LOL. Look in the garage. Under the tarp." I frowned. I walked to the garage. In the corner, under a blue tarp where Hank had piled some empty boxes, was a large, heavy object on wheels. I pulled the tarp off. It was a Honda EU 7000's inverter generator, a beast of a machine, and sitting on top of it was a heavy-duty transfer switch cable. Me. "Hank, you beautiful lunatic." Hank. "I told you. Backup plan. That baby will run the wall for 12 hours on a tank. Fill her up." I didn't just fill it up. I siphoned gas from my lawnmower. I ran the cable through the garage door, into the hallway, and plugged it into the special inlet Hank had installed on the sub-panel, just in case. I wheeled the generator onto the driveway. I wanted them to hear it. I pulled the starter cord. Vroom. The engine roared to life. It was loud. It was aggressive. Nanhum. It smelled like gasoline and victory. I ran inside and flipped the transfer switch. Hum! The fan spun up. The wall flickered. And then glorious, blinding green light flooded the street once more. I updated the text immediately. Nice try, Brenda. We are now running on diesel power. You can cut the grid, but you can't cut the truth. The crowd roared. It was louder this time. I saw Steve drop his clipboard down the street. He looked at the glowing window, then at the utility truck, then back at the window. He slumped. He knew he was beaten. The climax came on Sunday night. The HOA board called an emergency town hall. Usually these meetings were held in a small conference room at the clubhouse, attended by 3 people. This time they had to move it to the high school gymnasium. Every chair was full. Chinta. People were standing in the bleachers. There were signs. Dump Brenda, show us the ledger, and one guy holding a giant picture of my curtains that said, Midnight Azure Matters. I walked in at 7 p.m. The room went quiet, then erupted into applause. I felt like a gladiator entering the Colosseum. I took a seat in the front row, right in front of the folding table where the board sat. Brenda was there. She looked haggard. Her hair was slightly deflated. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, likely to hide the bags under her eyes, or to shield herself from the memory of my LED wall. Steve sat next to her, looking at his phone, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Brenda banged the gavel. It sounded weak in the cavernous gym. Order, she said. Order. We are here to discuss the recent cyber-terrorism event at 404 Maple Drive. It's not terrorism, yelled Mr. Henderson. It's a PowerPoint presentation. It is a violation of decency, Brenda shrilled, standing up. Jack Miller has engaged in a campaign of harassment. He has slandered this board. He has made a mockery of our property values. You stole 50 grand, someone shouted from the back. I did no such thing, Brenda slammed her hand on the table. BSJ Management provided critical administrative services. I worked tirelessly. I negotiated the trash contract. You hired your son's company for the trash contract. I spoke up. I didn't yell. I used my project manager voice. Calm. Projection. I have the bid sheets, Brenda. You rejected a bid from Waste Management that was 20% cheaper. I stood up and turned to the crowd. I held up a flash drive. I have the full data dump here, I said. I didn't just find the budget, I found the emails. A hush fell over the room. This was a bluff. I hadn't hacked her email. That would be a felony. But Brenda didn't know that. Brenda was a boomer who thought the cloud was actual weather. She saw the flash drive and saw her life flashing before her eyes. Emails? She whispered. The emails between you and the landscaping consultant about the Tuscany trip? I lied. The ones where you discuss how to expense the wine tours as agricultural research. Brenda's face went the color of unbaked dough. Steve stood up. Whoa, hold on. He looked at Brenda. He looked at the angry mob. He looked at me. I didn't sign off on any wine tours, Steve said into the microphone. I was told that was a conference. Et tu? Steve, I smirked. I'm not going to jail for this, Steve said, his cyborg preservation protocols kicking in. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in the president. Seconded, screamed Mrs. Gable. You can't do that, Brenda screeched. I am the president. I am the HOA. All in favor? Steve asked. Every hand in the gym went up, even the teenage kid in the back. Even the court stenographer raised her hand. Opposed? Silence. Motion carries, Steve said. Brenda, you are removed, effective immediately, and, we will be initiating a third-party forensic audit of all finances dating back to 2015. The words, forensic audit, hit Brenda like a physical blow. She grabbed her purse. She didn't say a word. She didn't look at the crowd. She turned and power-walked out the side exit, her heels clicking a frantic retreat. The gym erupted. It was pandemonium. People were hugging. Someone popped a confetti cannon. which was definitely a violation of the gym rules, but nobody cared. I stood there, feeling the adrenaline crash. It was over. The tyrant had fallen. Steve looked at me. "So, Jack, about the wall." "I'll take it down," I said, "tomorrow." "And the curtains?" "I'll put the blue ones back up." "Actually," Steve said, looking at the cheering crowd, "I think we can make an exception for Midnight Azure. Motion to amend the color palette?" "Aye!" roared the crowd. The next day, Hank returned. We drank beers while we dismantled the wall. It was sad, in a way. We were taking apart a monument to freedom. "You know," Hank said, unscrewing a panel, "you could leave it up, rent it out for birthdays, movie nights." "Nah," I said. "It served its purpose. Besides, the electric bill is going to be astronomical." We packed the panels back into the flight cases. We patched the holes in the drywall. We repainted the trim. By sunset, the living room was back to normal. I took the Midnight Azure curtains out of the closet. I hung them up. I slid them closed. I went outside to the street to look. The house was dark. The window was a soft, dark rectangle. No scrolling text, no neon green accusations. Just a house with blue curtains blocking the light. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I was about to go inside when a car pulled up. It was a 2004 Toyota Camry, beige, sensing nothing. An older woman stepped out. It was Mrs. Higgins, the lady with the poodle. "Jack," she called out. "Hey, Mrs. Higgins, you here to inspect the curtains?" "Oh, hush," she waved a hand. "They look lovely. Listen, we just had a quick board meeting. Since Steve resigned too, said too much stress, we voted." "Oh no," I said. "Don't tell me." "I'm the new president," she beamed. "And we were wondering, since you're so good with computers." "Mrs. Higgins, with all due respect, I am retired from political life." "We need a website," she said. "Just a simple one. To post the newsletter. And maybe a small section for Yard of the Month photos." I looked at her. She was sweet. She wasn't Brenda. She just wanted to show off people's petunias. I sighed. "Fine, but I'm charging a consulting fee." "Oh?" She looked worried. "How much?" "1 homemade apple pie per month," I said. She smiled. "Deal." I walked back into my house. I sat on my couch. I turned on the TV. I watched a show about nothing. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the HOA. Subject: "Welcome to the new Oak Creek." Body: "Dear residents, please note that the restriction on Midnight Azure window treatments has been lifted. Also, huge thanks to Jack Miller for illuminating the recent issues." I smiled, closed my eyes, and listened to the silence. No fans, no generators, no screaming. Just the quiet, sweet sound of malicious compliance. Job well done.